What would you do if someone judged your entire worth by a glance? It was 8:30 a.m. at Sterling and Pierce, a temple of corporate law. Lena Thorne, dressed in smart but unassuming slacks and a simple blouse, approached the gleaming reception desk. "Morning," the security guard grunted, not looking up. "Deliveries go to the back." Lena offered a calm smile, her access badge glinting subtly as she held it up. "Actually, I work here. The pressure cooker of a top law firm, where one meeting could change everything." Lena moved past the lobby's polished marble, through security, and into the buzzing open-plan bullpen. Fluorescent lights hummed over rows of desks, where paralegals and junior associates already hunched over glowing screens and towering stacks of documents. Lena quietly organized her small desk, her movements precise. Sarah, a junior paralegal at the next cubicle, chewed on her pen, eyes wide with anxiety. "Can you believe the Vance Group meeting is today? Mr. Finch has everyone on edge. This account is huge." Lena simply nodded, a reassuring presence in the morning chaos. Meet the man who believes his title defines everyone else's place. At 9 a.m., the executive corridor announced Arthur Finch before he even appeared. His booming voice echoed as he greeted a senior associate, a theatrical laugh following. Moments later, Finch himself swept into view, a perfectly tailored suit accentuating his imposing frame, silver hair slicked back. He commanded attention, radiating an air of untouchable importance. His eyes, however, barely registered Lena as he passed her cubicle, a dismissive glance that lumped her in with the furniture. Lena watched him go, a subtle flicker of keen interest in her otherwise composed expression. When power goes to your head, the fall is always harder. Arthur Finch had reigned supreme in Sterling and Pierce's corporate law division for 2 decades. His opulent office, filled with leather-bound legal tomes and framed accolades, offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, a physical manifestation of his towering ego. Finch believed in hierarchy, in knowing one's place, a philosophy he preached and practiced. He was reviewing his notes for the Vance Group presentation, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. This meeting was just another feather in his already overflowing cap. There's always more than meets the eye, especially when intelligence is underestimated. Away from the bustling bullpen, in a quiet corner of the law library, Lena Thorne was engrossed in a different kind of preparation. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over ancient legal texts. Her fingers flew across the keyboard of her discreet laptop, annotating complex case law and cross-referencing industry regulations, tasks far beyond any paralegal's typical duties. She wasn't just studying. She was dissecting, analyzing, and building a comprehensive understanding of the Vance Group's entire legal landscape. "They think I'm here to assist," asterisk she thought, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. "I'm here to assess." Her sharp, analytical mind was her most potent weapon, and she wielded it with surgical precision. The quietest person in the room often sees the most. At 10 a.m., Lena was in the conference room prep area, assisting Sarah with the final touches for the meeting. Trays of gourmet coffee and pastries were arranged meticulously, alongside neatly stacked binders. "Did you double-check the Q3 financial projections for their competitor Nexus Corp?" Lena asked quietly, adjusting a document. Sarah waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, no need, Lena. Mr. Finch only cares about choice numbers. Besides, that's a minor detail." Lena simply nodded, her expression unreadable, letting Sarah's casual dismissal wash over her. It was all part of the act, a small test confirming her observations. When millions are on the line, every detail matters. But does everyone see it? In his executive office, Mr. Harrison, the firm's managing partner, leaned forward across his rich mahogany desk, his expression stern. "Arthur, the Vance Group represents a significant portion of our firm's revenue. Eleanor Vance is discerning. She values not just legal acumen, but the entire cultural fabric of a partnership." Arthur Finch, lounging confidently, merely chuckled. "Harrison, relax. I've handled clients like Vance for 20 years. Leave the cultural fabric to me. My presentation is watertight." Harrison sighed, a flicker of unease in his eyes. He knew Eleanor Vance's reputation for attention to detail, a trait Arthur often overlooked. "The chess pieces are set, But who's really playing whom? Moments before the meeting, Lena put the finishing touches on the conference room. Water glasses were perfectly aligned, pens precisely centered on notepads. As Mr. Harrison entered, he paused. Catching Lena's eye, he offered a subtle nod, a brief, knowing glance that acknowledged a shared secret. Lena returned it with a composed smile. He knows, she thought, or at least he suspects my true purpose. Her internal monologue confirmed her strategic placement. She wasn't just a paralegal. She was the Vance Group's lead counsel, embedded to observe Sterling and Pierce's true colors. The stage was set, the players in position, and the real assessment was about to begin. The most powerful clients don't just judge your work, they judge your character. At 10:55 a.m., the polished glass doors of Sterling and Pierce slid open, admitting Eleanor Vance. She moved with an understated elegance, her charcoal suit tailored perfectly, her gaze sharp and assessing. Mr. Harrison, the managing partner, was already in the lobby, his smile broad and practiced. "Eleanor, welcome! So glad you could make it." Arthur Finch appeared beside him, a touch too quickly, extending a hand that felt more like a possessive claim. "Ms. Vance, a pleasure. We've been eagerly anticipating your arrival." Eleanor's handshake was firm, her smile polite but reserved. "Gentlemen," she acknowledged, her voice a cool, clear soprano. As she was ushered towards the conference room, her eyes subtly swept across the bustling lobby, lingering for a fraction of a second on a young black woman at a paralegal desk, before moving on. Nothing missed Eleanor Vance's discerning eye. In a room full of suits, who truly holds the power? The main conference room, a cavern of mahogany and high-tech displays, hummed with anticipation. Arthur Finch took his place at the head of the long table, a projector screen behind him displaying the Sterling and Pierce logo. Mr. Harrison sat to Eleanor Vance's right, a nervous energy emanating from him. Lena Thorne, dressed in her simple yet professional attire, sat quietly at the back of the room, a legal pad open before her. She was just another diligent paralegal, ostensibly there to take notes. Finch launched into his presentation, his voice booming with confident pronouncements about market trends and legal strategies. He gestured expansively, clearly relishing the spotlight, occasionally glancing at Eleanor for validation. Eleanor, for her part, remained attentive, her expression unreadable, her gaze occasionally drifting from Finch to the meticulously arranged documents, and sometimes, for just a flicker, to the quiet figure in the back. Sometimes the most important questions are the ones never asked aloud. As Finch droned on about Sterling and Pierce's unparalleled expertise and, quote, dominant market position, Eleanor Vance's gaze subtly shifted. She wasn't just evaluating the legal arguments or the firm's balance sheets. She was assessing the unspoken. Her eyes moved from Finch's confident but self-absorbed face to Mr. Harrison's anxious nods, then to the junior lawyers who offered deferential smiles, and finally, to Lena Thorne. Eleanor sought more than legal acumen. She sought a firm's true heart, its capacity for genuine collaboration, its foundational respect for every member of its team. She understood that inclusive leadership wasn't a buzzword for a presentation slide. It was the bedrock of enduring success. And as she observed, the cracks in Sterling and Pierce's polished facade began to show. The biggest blind spot is often the one you create for yourself. Arthur Finch, utterly engrossed in the sound of his own voice and the impressiveness of his slides, remained oblivious to Eleanor's deeper scrutiny. He continued his presentation, occasionally pausing for dramatic effect, always sweeping his gaze back to Eleanor, convinced he was charming her with his brilliance. Lena, meanwhile, continued to take detailed notes, her pen gliding across the page. She meticulously documented not just the legal points, but also Finch's nonverbal cues, his condescending tone when referring to a competitor as a firm that relies too heavily on its junior staff, and his complete disregard for anyone not seated at the main table. "Our support staff," Finch declared at one point with a dismissive wave of his hand, "they ensure everything runs smoothly, allowing us to focus on the big picture." Lena's pen paused for a moment, then added a precise, damning line to her report. "When you silence the smartest person in the room, you silence progress." Finch, in his haste to impress, made a minor but crucial misstatement regarding the Vance Group's main competitor's recent acquisition, citing an outdated figure. Lena's eyes flickered to her notes, then to a prepared document. Without a word, she quietly slid a small, folded piece of paper across the table to Mr. Harrison. He glanced at it, saw the correct figure, and a flash of alarm crossed his face. He began to open his mouth, a quiet, "Arthur, actually," on his lips. But Finch, caught in his own narrative, waved him off with a dismissive hand. "Not now, Harrison. Let me finish this point." Mr. Harrison, visibly frustrated, slumped back in his chair, the correction unspoken. Lena, her face impassive, simply returned her gaze to her pad. Another observation noted. Another opportunity for clarity lost to unchecked ego. The most important conversations often happen when no one's listening. A short break was called. The air filled with the polite chatter of the partners, all eager to engage Eleanor Vance. Lena, ever the efficient paralegal, quietly began refilling coffee cups and tidying the presentation materials. She moved with quiet competence, her movements precise. Eleanor Vance observed her, a thoughtful expression on her face as Lena neatly stacked spent sugar packets and refilled her cup. "Thank you, Lena," Eleanor said softly, a genuine warmth in her tone. Lena offered a small, professional nod. Arthur Finch, however, was deep in conversation with Mr. Harrison, discussing the finer points of his earlier presentation, completely oblivious to the silent exchange, or to Lena's very presence, except as a service provider. He gestured grandly, a fresh cup of coffee appearing in his hand as if by magic. The stage is set, the players are in position, but who will truly perform? As the break wound down and everyone began to settle back into their seats, Eleanor Vance's eyes met Lena's across the conference room. This time, there was a small, knowing smile on Eleanor's lips, a subtle acknowledgement of a shared understanding that transcended the superficial roles being played. Lena felt a surge of readiness, a calm confidence blossoming within her. She knew her moment to truly observe the firm's culture, its respect for all, its openness to intellect regardless of packaging, was not just approaching, but was imminent. The initial pleasantries were over. The true test of Sterling and Pierce, and indeed of Arthur Finch, was about to begin. Even the most polished facades crack under pressure. The short coffee break had done little to ease the underlying tension in the Sterling and Pierce conference room. Arthur Finch, ever the showman, restarted his presentation with a forced flourish, his voice booming slightly louder than before, as if to compensate for the brief interlude. He was discussing market share projections, a topic he usually dominated with ease. But a slight hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, betrayed a moment of doubt. He misstated a key growth statistic for a rival firm, a detail Lena Thorne had meticulously cross-referenced just that morning. From her quiet position at the back, Lena didn't react visibly. Instead, her eyes briefly dropped to the pad of notes in her lap, a subtle, almost imperceptible confirmation of the correct figures for herself. Finch quickly corrected his own error, brushing it off with a chuckle, oblivious to the fact that someone in the room had already caught it. He continued, regaining his stride, but the momentary stumble had been noted. "When your value is reduced to a task, how do you respond?" Finch, in the full swing of his presentation, began to feel the familiar parched throat of a long speech. He paused mid-sentence, his gaze sweeping across the room, not truly seeing anyone until it landed on Lena. She was diligently taking notes, her posture unassuming, her presence almost invisible. To Finch, she was simply another piece of the background machinery. Without breaking his rhythm or even bothering with a polite request, he gestured dismissively in her direction, his voice cutting through the professional hum. "Paralegal, get us some fresh coffee. And make sure it's hot. This one's gone cold." The words hung in the air, heavy with entitlement. Lena's pen stilled. A familiar, hot burn of injustice flared in her chest, a sensation she'd learned to compartmentalize over years. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, met Eleanor Vance's for a fleeting, charged moment. Eleanor's expression remained perfectly unreadable, a mask of polite attentiveness that concealed a sharp, calculating mind. True strength isn't about shouting. It's about strategic silence. Lena Thorne didn't flinch. She didn't roll her eyes or sigh. With a calm, measured grace that belied the insult, she closed her notebook, placed her pen neatly beside it, and rose from her seat. She moved around the polished conference table, collecting the half-empty coffee cups with quiet efficiency. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, a silent act of defiance. Eleanor Vance's gaze followed Lena's every step, a silent observer in this impromptu test of character. As Lena reached the door and exited the room, the soft click of the latch echoed the sudden shift in atmosphere. Eleanor then turned her attention back to Arthur Finch, a new, almost imperceptible sharpness in her discerning eyes. When bias is so ingrained it feels like just the way things are, Finch, oblivious to the subtle shift he'd caused, merely shrugged off the interruption. "You know how paralegals are," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, directing his comment to Mr. Harrison. "Always needing direction, even for the simplest tasks." Mr. Harrison offered a tight, uncomfortable smile, shifting in his seat, clearly uneasy but unwilling to challenge Finch. He attempted to pivot the conversation back to the legal points, a weak deflection. Eleanor Vance, however, remained silent, her gaze unwavering, observing Finch with an almost clinical detachment. His casual dismissal, the ingrained prejudice, had just provided a crucial data point in her assessment of Sterling and Pierce's true culture. Every insult can be a data point in a larger strategy. In the quiet solitude of the break room, the aroma of fresh coffee beans filled the air. Lena Thorne moved with practiced ease, refilling the carafe. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. This wasn't the first time her capabilities had been reduced to a menial task, her intellect dismissed because of her appearance or perceived status. Each instance had been a sting, but also a lesson. She mentally catalogued Finch's dismissive gesture, his patronizing tone, his casual assumption of her place. This wasn't just about coffee. It was about respect. She would add this incident, a vivid anecdote, to the observations section of her mental report for Eleanor. It solidified her resolve, sharpened her purpose. The quietest moments often speak the loudest volumes. Lena returned to the conference room, a tray laden with steaming coffee cups. Her movements were as unobtrusive as her departure, a ghost in the machine of corporate power. She quietly placed a fresh cup in front of Finch, then Eleanor. Finch, engrossed in his own rhetoric, took his coffee without a glance, continuing his speech without missing a beat, completely oblivious to the silent transaction that had just taken place. He was too focused on his own performance, too blind to the subtle dynamics at play. But Eleanor Vance was not. As Lena set her cup down, Eleanor offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, a silent message exchanged between two intelligent women. When a client asks about culture, they're often looking for red flags. As Finch transitioned to discussing the firm's internal structure, Eleanor Vance leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Mr. Finch," she interrupted, her voice soft but firm, "I'm curious about your firm's approach to internal team collaboration. How do you ensure that all voices across various departments and levels are truly heard?" Finch, momentarily thrown, recovered quickly. He launched into a well-rehearsed speech about individual excellence and, quote, merit-based hierarchies, deftly deflecting the spirit of her question. His words emphasized competition over collaboration, individual brilliance over collective wisdom. Eleanor's gaze flickered to Lena, who continued to diligently take notes, her pen moving across the page with unwavering precision. The silence after a pitch can be deafening. Finch wrapped up his presentation with a flourish. A confident smile plastered across his face, clearly expecting immediate praise and a handshake deal. He looked at Eleanor Vance, anticipating her enthusiastic endorsement. Instead, Eleanor offered polite but non-committal thanks. "Thank you, Mr. Finch." "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice smooth but distant. "Your presentation was comprehensive. I will need some time to reflect on the firm's overall approach before making a final decision." Her words hung in the air, leaving a distinct chill. Finch's expectant smile faltered. Mr. Harrison, however, looked visibly concerned, sensing the subtle disapproval that Eleanor had so carefully veiled. The meeting concluded, but the decision and its profound implications remained hanging in the balance. Confidence is good, but overconfidence blinds you to the truth. Arthur Finch leaned back in his plush leather chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. The meeting with the Vance Group had just concluded, and in his mind it had been a triumph. "Harrison, my dear fellow, did you see her face?" Eleanor Vance was absolutely captivated. "I tell you, a masterclass in corporate litigation presentation." He waved a dismissive hand, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. "We've got this in the bag. Sterling and Pierce once again proves why we're untouchable." Mr. Harrison, the managing partner, stood by the window, his brow slightly furrowed as he gazed at the city skyline. She was polite, Arthur, and quite vague about her reflection on our overall approach. That's not quite a definitive win. "Nonsense," Finch scoffed, taking a hearty sip. "That's just Eleanor Vance playing hard to get. A woman of her caliber appreciates a strong hand. She respects decisiveness. She respects power. And I showed her plenty of both today." He chuckled, completely missing the subtle worry etched on Harrison's face. The quiet work behind the scenes often holds the greatest power. Later that afternoon, in the bustling paralegal bullpen, Lena Thorne sat at her desk, the rhythmic click of her keyboard a counterpoint to the hushed conversations around her. While others gossiped about Finch's triumphant mood, Lena was meticulously crafting a document far more significant than any standard legal brief. Her fingers flew across the keys, compiling a detailed report on not just the legal aspects of Sterling and Pierce, but its very de-standard cultural dynamics. She typed with a cool, analytical precision, recalling every microaggression, every dismissive glance, every subtle power play she had witnessed. The fetch coffee incident, Finch's patronizing tone, his casual disregard for anyone he deemed support staff, each was logged, time-stamped, and analyzed. This wasn't just a report. It was an ethnographic study of power, prejudice, and intellectual arrogance. Her internal monologue was sharp, decisive. Every observation is a data point. Every slight, a piece of evidence. She knew this report would be far more damning than any legal misstep. When a client asks for a private word, it's rarely good news for the unprepared. The phone rang on Mr. Harrison's desk, its quiet buzz cutting through the late afternoon lull. It was Eleanor Vance. Harrison answered, a polite smile fixed on his face, but his posture stiffened as he listened. "Mr. Harrison." Eleanor's voice was calm, authoritative, and utterly devoid of the effusiveness Finch had imagined. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up conversation for tomorrow morning, not just about the legal strategy, but the firm's internal dynamics." A pause, then a pointed request. "And, Mr. Harrison, I'd like Lena Thorne to be present." Harrison's eyes widened slightly. "Lena Thorne, the paralegal," he stammered, surprised. He knew Lena was sharp, but for Eleanor Vance to specifically ask for her? This was unprecedented. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Eleanor's request, delivered with such understated gravity, felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. He agreed, a sense of dread settling over him. The implications were clear. Something was wrong, and Eleanor Vance had noticed. The man who thinks he knows everything is about to learn a harsh lesson. Mr. Harrison found Arthur Finch in his office, still basking in his self-proclaimed glory. Finch was reviewing a golf handicap, a cigar unlit in his hand. "Eleanor Vance just called," Harrison began, trying to keep his voice even. "She wants a follow-up meeting tomorrow, and she specifically asked for Lena Thorne to be there." Finch snorted, a plume of imaginary cigar smoke wafting from his mouth. "Lena? For what, exactly? To make sure the coffee is fresh this time?" "Harrison, don't be ridiculous. Tell her the paralegal is busy. Or, better yet," he leaned forward, conspiratorial, "just tell her to bring the coffee. Don't let her speak. She'll only muddle things. You know, manage your staff. Keep them in their place. This is about our legal expertise, not clerical support." He waved his hand dismissively, his face a mask of blustering confidence. Harrison's conflicted expression went unnoticed. Arthur Finch, in his supreme arrogance, was completely blind to the trap he was helping to set. When preparation meets opportunity, the underestimated rise. In the quiet sanctuary of her apartment that evening, Lena Thorne moved with a focused intensity. The city lights twinkled outside her window, a distant hum compared to the buzzing anticipation within her. She reviewed her meticulous report, each bullet point a testament to her keen observation and unwavering intellect. Her internal monologue was a rehearsal, every point sharpened, every argument fortified. This wasn't just about presenting facts. It was about delivering justice. She carefully selected her attire for the next day, a sharp, impeccably tailored navy suit, a stark contrast to the unassuming paralegal scrubs she usually wore. This suit wasn't just clothing. It was armor, a declaration. She looked at her reflection, a determined glint in her eyes. The journey had been long, the slights many. But tomorrow, the quiet observer would become the undeniable authority. The stage was set, and Lena Thorne was ready to step into her true power. When the costume changes, so does the power. The next morning, the polished lobby of Sterling and Pierce was abuzz as usual, but Lena Thorne moved through it with a subtly altered aura. Gone were the quiet, practical clothes. In their place, a perfectly tailored navy suit, sharp and authoritative, exuded quiet confidence. Her hair was styled, her posture regal. As she approached the paralegal bullpen, Sarah, busy arranging files, looked up and did a genuine double-take. "Lena," Sarah blinked, surprised. You look different." It was an understatement. Lena looked like she belonged in the corner office, not the bullpen. Lena offered a small, knowing smile, a hint of steel glinting in her eyes. "Just dressing for the occasion, Sarah." Her voice was calm, but held an unmistakable note of anticipation. The firm, accustomed to seeing her as background, was about to discover the true force she represented. The calm before the storm. He has no idea what's coming. In the private meeting room, moments before Eleanor Vance was due to arrive, Arthur Finch strode in, still oblivious, still convinced of his own superiority. He saw Lena standing calmly by the table, dressed in her sharp suit. He scoffed, a dismissive sound that filled the tense silence. "Lena, nice try," he drawled, his voice thick with condescension. "But you're still a paralegal. Stick to the back. We have important client matters to discuss, not a fashion show." Mr. Harrison fidgeted nervously, unable to meet Lena's gaze. Lena met Finch's sneer with a calm, unblinking stare. Her silence was potent, a contained power that Finch, in his arrogance, utterly failed to perceive. He had no idea this was his last dismissal, his final act of self-sabotage. The storm was about to break. The air in the private meeting room was thick with a tension that Finch, still basking in his perceived triumph, completely failed to notice. Mr. Harrison, however, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze flicking nervously between Eleanor Vance and Lena Thorne. Eleanor, ever composed, clasped her hands neatly on the polished table. Her voice, usually smooth, carried a new, sharper edge that cut through the silence. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Finch, thank you for this follow-up. My purpose here today extends beyond just legal strategy. It's about culture." Finch's brow furrowed for a fleeting second, a flicker of confusion. Son John 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 Son John 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 Culture Mond Son John John Son John 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 Mean John John John. He straightened his tie, a condescending smirk threatening to surface. Mr. Harrison, however, visibly stiffened, a knot forming in his stomach. He sensed the unspoken weight of Eleanor's words, a premonition of judgment. Lena, seated quietly, her sharp suit a stark contrast to her previous day's attire, remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. She was the calm at the center of a gathering storm. The moment you realize the rules of the game have changed, but you're still playing by the old ones. Eleanor Vance's eyes, as sharp and discerning as a seasoned prosecutor's, then turned directly to Lena. It was a subtle shift, but one that felt like a spotlight in the hushed room. Finch, still mentally preparing to pivot back to legal jargon, blinked, surprised by the client's sudden focus on the paralegal. He opened his mouth, perhaps to offer another patronizing explanation for Lena's presence, but Eleanor cut him off, her gaze unwavering. "And you, Lena," Eleanor said, her voice clear and precise. "Mr. Finch, you've referred to Lena as the paralegal who fetches coffee, is that correct?" Finch, caught off guard, nodded dismissively. "Yes, well, she was, assisting with refreshments, Ms. Vance. Efficiently, I might add, very good at following direction." He even offered a small, self-satisfied chuckle, oblivious to the precipice he stood upon. Lena met Eleanor's piercing stare, her own eyes a steady, unblinking pool of calm. There was no fear, no anger, only a profound sense of poised anticipation. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken meaning. It was the moment before the truth shatters everything, and one man's carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Eleanor Vance offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of amusement, but of grim satisfaction. "Perhaps," she suggested, her voice soft yet carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "You should introduce yourself properly, Lena." Lena Thorne rose from her chair, her movement fluid and confident. The tailored suit, which had caused Sarah a double-take that morning, now seemed to transform her from an observer into a formidable presence. She walked to the head of the table, directly opposite Arthur Finch, and placed her hands on the table's edge. Her gaze, direct and unwavering, locked onto Finch's, then swept to Mr. Harrison. Her voice, clear and authoritative, filled the room, leaving no doubt as to its owner's absolute command. "Arthur, Mr. Harrison, my name is Lena Thorne, and I am the lead counsel for the Vance Group, here to observe your firm's culture and determine our future partnership." Arthur Finch's jaw dropped, a grotesque caricature of disbelief. The folder he had been clutching slipped from his nerveless fingers, clattering loudly against the polished floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden, cavernous silence. Mr. Harrison, his face draining of all color, looked utterly mortified, a man watching his career aspirations dissolve into thin air. It was the mic drop moment, when the intern reveals she's the boss. Finch stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of his mistake. That's impossible. You're a paralegal. You were fetching coffee." "I told you to get coffee." His mind, so accustomed to rigid hierarchies, couldn't reconcile the image of the support staff with the woman who now stood before him, emanating undeniable authority. Lena remained perfectly calm, her voice cutting through his frantic excuses like a surgeon's scalpel. "I was observing, Arthur, every interaction, every dismissal, and your actions and treatment of the paralegal were duly noted." Her words were a chilling pronouncement, the weight of his own prejudice now crushing him. Finch's face, already pale, seemed to shrink further, his eyes wide with a desperate, trapped animal fear. His whole world just crumbled, and he has no one to blame but himself. Eleanor Vance then turned her gaze to Mr. Harrison, a look of profound disappointment etched on her face. Her voice, though still calm, held the unyielding force of a final judgment. "Mr. Harrison," she stated, "your firm's legal prowess is undeniable. Your reputation for excellence in the courtroom is well established. However, your culture of respect, particularly for those you perceive as lesser in the internal hierarchy, is deeply concerning." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Mr. Finch's repeated dismissals, culminating in his casual instruction for Miss Thorne, our bowed lead counsel, to fetch coffee, speaks volumes. It is a key factor in our assessment of Sterling and Pierce moving forward. Mr. Harrison winced, his shame palpable. Finch, meanwhile, had visually shrunk in his seat, a man utterly defeated. When your client becomes your judge, the verdict is swift. True leaders own their mistakes and commit to change. Mr. Harrison, the firm's managing partner, looked utterly deflated, his usual composed demeanor shattered. Arthur Finch had been escorted out mere moments before, leaving an echoing silence in the private meeting room, a silence filled with the weight of his undeniable transgressions. Harrison's shoulders slumped as he turned to Lena Thorne, then to Eleanor Vance. "Miss Thorne, Miss Vance," he began, his voice thick with genuine shame, "I am profoundly sorry. On behalf of Sterling and Pierce, I apologize for the egregious cultural failings demonstrated today, and for the utterly unacceptable treatment you, Lena, endured. It reflects poorly on everything we claim to stand for." He ran a hand over his thinning hair, his eyes pleading for understanding. "This firm prides itself on its integrity, its meritocracy. Clearly we have strayed. I assure you both, immediate and decisive action will be taken to rectify this." Lena met his gaze, her expression calm, accepting but firm. Eleanor, ever discerning, simply watched, her thoughtful expression hinting at a deeper assessment. When the underdog becomes the gatekeeper, the game truly changes. Eleanor Vance nodded slowly, a subtle shift in her posture signaling a path forward. Mr. Harrison, your candor is noted. The Vance Group seeks partners, not just legal counsel. We seek firms whose internal culture mirrors our values of respect and inclusion. Today's events, while unfortunate, have also been remarkably illuminating. She turned to Lena, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. Lena, your insights, your composure, and your unyielding commitment to justice are precisely what we require. The Vance Group will continue its partnership with Sterling and Pierce, but only on the condition that you, Lena Thorne, serve as our dedicated lead counsel. Lena's posture remained poised, but a quiet strength resonated in her voice as she accepted. I understand, Eleanor, and I accept. My vision for this partnership is one built on genuine collaboration, where every voice, every perspective, is not just heard, but valued. We will build a legal strategy that is as inclusive as it is incisive, representing the true spirit of justice. The two women exchanged a firm handshake, a shared look of mutual respect solidifying their alliance. The power dynamic of the room, and indeed the firm, had irrevocably shifted. Consequences come for those who refuse to learn. Later that day, the polished mahogany of Mr. Harrison's office felt like an execution block for Arthur Finch. Finch, still reeling, attempted to bluster, to deflect, to blame. Harrison, this is outrageous. A paralegal? This is a setup. She entrapped me. Mr. Harrison's expression was unyielding, his voice stern. Arthur, your behavior today was merely the culmination of a pattern of dismissiveness and prejudice that has been noted by multiple staff members over the years. This wasn't a setup, it was an observation, and your reaction to Miss Thorne's reveal only solidifies the necessity of this action. He paused, letting the words sink in. Effective immediately, you are suspended for 2 weeks without pay. Upon your return, you will complete mandatory sensitivity training and professional development courses focusing on inclusive leadership. Any further incidents of this nature, and your position at Sterling and Pierce will be terminated. Finch's face, a moment ago flushed with indignation, drained of color. He opened his mouth to argue, but Harrison's icy stare cut him off. Finch, defeated, merely nodded, his shoulders slumped as he left, the heavy oak door closing with a definitive thud behind him. Justice served isn't just for the victim, it's for everyone who witnessed the injustice. The news, as expected, spread like wildfire through the hushed corridors of Sterling and Pierce. Whispers turned into open awe, then quiet, relieved exclamations. In the paralegal bullpen, Sarah stared at Lena, who was now walking with an undeniable aura of authority, her suit a testament to her true station. Lena, Sarah breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of shock and profound respect. You did it. Across the firm, junior lawyers and administrative staff, who had long endured Finch's condescension, exchanged knowing glances. A quiet sense of vindication settled over them. It wasn't just Lena's triumph. It was a victory for every person who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told to know their place by someone who believed title trumped talent. The air in Sterling and Pierce felt lighter, cleaner, as if a long-held oppressive weight had been lifted. Lena, walking through the bullpen, offered a small, confident smile to Sarah and others, acknowledging their silent support, their shared understanding. From fetching coffee to calling the shots, the ultimate glow-up story. Days later, an all-staff email from Mr. Harrison landed in every inbox, its subject line announcing, quote, "A new era of leadership and partnership." It formally introduced Lena Thorne as the new lead counsel for the Vance Group, detailing her impressive qualifications, her strategic acumen, and her commitment to fostering an inclusive environment. The language was unambiguous, the message clear. Sterling and Pierce was changing, and Lena Thorne was at the forefront of that change. Lena sat in her new corner office, the panoramic city view stretching out beyond the polished glass. Her name, Lena Thorne, lead counsel, was tastefully displayed on the frosted door. She ran a hand over the smooth surface of her new desk, a faint, satisfied smile touching her lips. The journey from being told to fetch coffee to orchestrating a strategic partnership was a long one, paved with quiet intellect and unshakable resolve. She had been underestimated, dismissed, and judged, but she had used every insult, every oversight, as fuel for her rise. This wasn't just a new job. It was a new chapter, Not just for her, but for the very idea of what leadership and respect truly meant. When arrogance gets shattered, what's left behind? Weeks later, the polished halls of Sterling and Pierce held a different kind of silence. Arthur Finch returned from his suspension, a ghost of his former blustering self. The expensive suits still draped his frame, but they no longer seemed to carry the same weight of self-importance. His eyes, once quick to dismiss, now darted away, avoiding direct contact with anyone, especially the junior staff he'd once deemed invisible. One morning, as he shuffled past the executive corridors, he caught sight of Lena Thorne. She moved with an easy confidence, her presence commanding respect that wasn't granted by title alone, but earned through intellect and integrity. Their paths crossed near the grand entrance to the Vance Group's dedicated suite. Finch stiffened, his jaw working. "Good morning, Miss Thorne," he managed, the words a forced politeness that felt alien on his tongue. Lena met his gaze, a professional but reserved nod her only reply. The interaction was brief, loaded with unspoken history, leaving one to wonder if the lesson had truly taken root, or if it was merely fear of consequence that had clipped his wings. One person's stand can change an entire institution. Months passed, and a new culture began to blossom within Sterling and Pierce. Lena Thorne, now firmly established as the Vance Group's lead counsel, didn't just manage cases, she mentored. She actively sought out junior staff, including a visibly more confident Sarah, fostering an environment where ideas were judged on merit, not origin. "Your insights are valuable," Lena would often say. "Speak up, always." Mr. Harrison, true to his word, had spearheaded new diversity and inclusion initiatives, visibly crediting Lena's influence in all staff meetings. The firm, once a bastion of old-world hierarchy, was slowly but surely transforming, a testament to the fact that genuine change could begin with one person's courage and strategic intellect. Never judge a book by its cover, especially in a world where talent hides in plain sight. Lena Thorne's story, echoing through the corporate corridors and beyond, served as a powerful reminder. It highlighted the insidious danger of prejudice, the way judgment based on appearance or perceived status blinds individuals to true talent and invaluable contributions. It underscored the profound importance of listening to all voices, regardless of where they sit in a perceived hierarchy. For when we fail to do so, we don't just dismiss an individual. We silence progress, we stifle innovation, and we diminish our own understanding of the world. Your voice matters. Don't let anyone silence it. In a world that still too often tries to put people in boxes to define them by a glance or an assumption, remember Lena Thorne. Remember her quiet strength, her unwavering intellect, and her strategic patience. When someone attempts to diminish your worth, to tell you to just fetch coffee when you possess the acumen to lead, let her story be your shield and your sword. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for what's right, because you never know who you're really talking to. And more importantly, every person deserves to be heard, to have their expertise respected, and to be seen for the full measure of their intellect and humanity. Join the conversation and share your own triumphs. If Lena's powerful story of justice served and assumptions shattered resonated with you, make sure to subscribe for more incredible true stories that celebrate intellect and resilience. And let us know in the comments below, have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked or your assumed position? Share your story. Your experiences are powerful, and together, we can champion a world where every voice is valued.